Rob, I talk to CISOs and their basic model of security is, let me create an environment where it's so difficult to get anything from us that it's just not worth it. Move on to the next person. But what you're saying is there are some really advanced threat actors that are persistent and they're coming after you and they have some really impressive techniques. I want to hear what they are.
The rather unwelcome development that we've seen is there are some threat actors now who are undoubtedly extremely persistent. They're just gangs. I mean, we're not talking nation state. We're not talking hacktivists. We're literally just talking about ransomware gangs who are very persistent. Some of the stuff they're doing, it's just common sense. If you want to get around security software, first of all, target Hyper-V servers. Okay, so if you can get into a Hyper-V server, it's effectively the same as having access to the hard drives, pulling hard drives out of a physical computer. Now, there's a couple of strategies that you can employ to make that not possible. I mean, one is encrypt your servers. So if you encrypt your server, then basically that's going to be useless to them because they're going to need the decryption key to be able to get access to that data. The other way you can tackle it is with what we call storage control. So restricting which programs have access to what data. So it's applying the principle of least privilege, basically. So saying, why would anything other than Hyper-V need to access a VHD or a VHDX file? The fact is, it doesn't. So if you deny by default, if you block everything except Hyper-V from accessing a VHD or a VHDX file, they're not going to be able to perform that particular attack. Again, it all comes back to that principle of deny by default and permit by exception.
Which is the philosophy of ThreatLocker. I mean, that is the way you operate. And for those people who hear that phrase, deny by default, and your hairs go up, I want you to know that what the way ThreatLocker handles it is not in a business debilitating manner.
It's only to allow what needs to happen, only allow what needs to run, only allow things to do what they need to do and no more. So by putting controls in place around what these things can do, you're going to massively reduce the potential for bad things to happen.
I'll give the other a good analogy with regards to these credit agencies who are by default open. By default, companies like Equifax are perpetually open, meaning anyone can do a credit check at any time. And so if you freeze your accounts, kind of in this way, what you're doing is you're sort of locking it only to the times you want to use it. And that's essentially what you're doing with ThreatLocker, which I think is just a good basic philosophy. The problem is some of these programs have been set up like these credit companies, just let it all happen all the time until someone tells me, no, don't let it happen all the time, which is what you do.
But it is a good analogy with what we do, which is, by default, computers permit everything. And to be honest, it's the same with traditional security tools. Allow everything to happen unless it's known to be malicious. Now, the problem with that is not everybody knows all of the bad things. Not everybody knows everything that's malicious. So that's why that strategy is ineffective. So, as I said, if you turn that strategy around and say, no, instead of allowing everything to run other than the bad things, if you instead say, only allow what's required, it is a much more effective way of looking at things. And it's a much more effective strategy for protecting yourselves.
Go freeze all your credit accounts. Also, do the same thing with your computing environment as well. The same exact thing. Go check out what they're doing at ThreatLocker. ThreatLocker.com. It's right there.